Peas podcast. If you're enjoying this, please go ahead, like, subscribe, squish, smash all the appropriate buttons. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Today I have a special guest, a returning friend, Mr. Jack Peach. You can find him on Twitter at ThinkingPeach, and you can also find him on his website, same ThinkingPeach, www.thinkingpeach.com. He is the missing piece between Red Pill and a real relationship. Welcome back, brother.
Thanks for having me back, Joel. It's good to see you again. Good to catch up. When was the last time we did it? Do you remember?
It might have been about a year ago, I think.
Man, that's gone quick.
It's gone quick. Yeah, it was like, hey, let's catch up again soon. And I was like, when I finished the podcast with you, I was like, I want to talk to him again. And that's what I've been doing. Like, part of the podcast is like, yeah, I want talk to new people, obviously, but then also like, I want to be able to bring back as many people as possible and talk again, because things will change from year to year. People have different things going on, or just like, hey, I just really enjoy talking to you. Like, we have an hour, so I can't really kind of dive into all of someone's thoughts within the hour or two. And hopefully I'm getting better at what I'm doing too, so I can kind of just talk about different things, but also just like it's just me being able to talk with a friend again. And that, that's kind of how I want the podcast to be, like two friends talking. And so like, you don't just talk to your friend one time and be like, all right, thanks a lot. It's like, no, man, you keep it going, man. So you're one of those that I really wanted to have on again.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, you hope people do change, right? Like you shouldn't say stay true in your beliefs and your thoughts and your thought processes. So if I had, I'd be disappointed in myself. So hopefully I've got something more to add. And I've had quite a lot of progress in the past year as well. Well, maybe not progress, but a lot of change, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I think we're going to dig into when we go through. So yeah, it's good to be back anyway. It's always good. I enjoy being on podcasts. It's always fun. It's always fun to talk to my friends. So
yeah,
it's good.
I'm the same way. The first time I got invited into a podcast a few years ago, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I would like to do this. And that's kind of how it started for me. I was like, this is, I like talking, and I prefer, I actually prefer talking to like writing. So it's like, I don't know if it's my way of avoiding the writing, because I don't know. And then I don't know. I like being able to be with somebody else and kind of talk my thoughts through, because sometimes I talk to people and it's, oh, I never thought about that way, but you're kind of like figuring things out on your own, and it makes it kind of interesting because you're kind of volleying the idea back and forth, or or a new feeling. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't think of it that way, but that's pretty cool. So I see it as I don't know, as a benefit to me. It's a benefit to me to have you on and to be able to speak to you. And, hopefully it's mutual, but, selfishly, it's like, okay, I'm getting something out of this. So this is great.
Yeah, exactly, man. I find sometimes when you get into these flow states and these kind of conversations, and this happens to me all the time when I'm coaching as well, is you sometimes come to kind of these, like, have these epiphanies when you're just speaking. It's like you enter this like mental flow space where you're talking about an idea and suddenly all these new ideas coalesce. It doesn't happen every time, but that's something that happens to me. I actually record all my coaching sessions for that, because occasionally I'll say something, I was like, damn, I said something really good, what was it? And I have to go through and I've got like a transcription thing, and I'll go through the transcripts and stuff. So yeah, it's powerful. When two people are bouncing ideas off each other, that's when the way I kind of see it is like, time alone is when you kind of like refine ideas. But when you have really great ideas, I find they tend to come in like conversation with people. When you're having a kind of conversation with someone else, you get in their perspective and you're like sounding things off them. You'll go into a flow state that will give you this new idea that then you can refine and write. So that's something that happens to me often. I think other people probably have different creative processes.
Yeah, that's true.
To work me.
But it's interesting that you say that, because I guess that talks to the importance of like who you're surrounding yourself with, right? Like, and I think I've kind of had this conversation. I've had over is what's so cool about Twitter is because it's people kind of sharing their thoughts, right? That's basically what it is. And you can kind of like I was attracted to what you were saying, and then so it's like, oh, like so you have those conversations on there, and that's why I think the podcast works, is because it's like, okay, we've kind of had interactions on there. We might see the world in similar ways. So then when you do have a thought, it's like you're kind of, the iron sharpens iron whole idea. Like I was doing a podcast with David Headmaster, and and it's just last week. We just released it. It came out yesterday, and so his whole thing was quitting porn, and we were talking, and I was talking to him. It was like, oh, like I think I want to help people quit porn, but then they have to pick up a new habit, so I can help them with their online business. It's like, oh, I should add that into my coaching. And like you could see, like his wheels were like, I need to write this down. And it's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
we've been talking about. It's like he hadn't thought about it, but through the conversation, it was like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. And it was kind of like, it made me feel good because it's like, oh, okay, like, somebody is getting, he's getting something out of the podcast, more than it just being like, okay, hopefully somebody listens to it and they pick up ideas. Like he was getting more out of it, and that was I don't know, gratifying. That was gratifying for me.
Yeah, I mean, conversations should be synergistic. Like it should be two people coming together and meeting of minds. And if you're properly engaged in the conversation, right, which is another issue maybe we'll talk about another time.
Yeah. So the first time we talked about your book, Weaponized Sex, and it was the how feminism had worked its way into the culture and how it affected things. How long ago did you write that? Was it because I'm sure it took you a while to kind of gather all that information that you needed and then write it?
I think it took me about 9 months to write it. So I started writing it I mean, it's quite long, and it was a lot of research. And then obviously I'm working full time. It's not like at that point I was working full time, not anymore. And, actually I'd started writing it just before lockdown happened. And I did kind of the majority of it during lockdown here in Thailand. But then in total, I got like the main book kind of done during those kind of 2 months. So I think we were only locked down for 2 months here. But then as anyone who's wrote anything seriously will tell you, is editing is actually the long part. Like if you want to make it good, it's the editing that really takes, especially when you're writing something that is, a thesis and has a lot of moving parts in it. You got to make sure it flows right. You got to make sure it's all connected. Yeah. You're not kind of speaking out of line here that doesn't kind of make sense and stuff. So it took 9 months in total. Probably took about 3 months or 4 months to write and 5 or 6 to edit. And then I released it in September 2020. So yeah, about a year ago.
Okay, yeah, because I think maybe soon after that's when we had the podcast, and then now you've kind of transitioned into like relationship coaching. Is that right? How did that come? How did that come about in the first place? Where you're like, oh, okay, I've done this. Was it like people had started to come to you and like asking for advice on dating? Like, how did that kind of come up for you?
Yeah, so basically I had a lot of people asking me certain questions about certain things, like whether it was relationships, dating, finding women, meeting women, are there any good women left, this kind of stuff. And I was answering them in the DMs, and I was just like, you know what, like I'm doing this for free. I might as well charge for it, basically. So it was kind of like the demand was there, and it was like, okay, so there's demand for this, and like people seem to be happy with my answers. So I thought I'm going to try it. Try it out, see how it goes. And it was kind of the natural progression there, but also it is kind of a natural progression of what is my thesis for the book, or at least my solutions for the problems that I see in society. Is that I can't remember if we talked about this last time, if I'm repeating myself here, but basically I see like culture. The problem with culture is men are the guardians of culture, and then we kind of eroded our guardianship over time. We've kind of abandoned the walls, as it were, and we've let cultural poison in, and we've let it kind of infest. And I believe it's up to men to cast that out and to create new walls now, because the walls have crumbled, right? We have to create new walls. And I also see one of the ways that men do this is through the family and through leading the family, through guardianship, as well as community and other areas as well, churches, whatever religious institutions, these kind of areas. But I realized that if I want to actually have the impact that I really do want to do the thing, like if I want to have a real meaningful change beyond just talking about something, one ways I can actually have a genuine impact is by improving men's relationships and hopefully getting them into committed relationships, particularly the kind of guys that I'm talking with, who are guys who have a similar worldview. They believe this, they understand this, but they're necessarily able to apply it
Mm-hmm.
properly,
Mm-hmm.
or they have the understanding, but they can't, it's not quite working out for them for whatever reason. And if I can get them over that hurdle, if I can get them to meet a good quality woman, be able to screen her, vet her, make sure that, she's right for them, make sure they have the skills to move forward, make sure they're approaching the relationship in the right way as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of my clients are single, not all of them. It's probably about 70% single, 30% in relationships. But if I can get them to get into a good relationship with the right model for a relationship, which is a patriarchal but paternal model,
Mm-hmm.
Which is where I kind of branch off from the red pill, right? Because there's a slight difference there. And if I can get people to do that, that's one way I can have a meaningful change on some people's lives, right? I don't think I'm going to change the world. I'm not, some people have the ability, the character, the drive, and they can change the world. I do believe that one person can shift the way the world is going, but I don't think that's me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm realistic about my abilities, about my place in this, on Earth. But I can have a change, right? I can have an impact, sorry,
Right.
and I can make some change. And this is one of the ways that I felt I could do that. It's personally meaningful. I'm good at it. I find it fun. I enjoy it. And obviously it also provides me with the kind of lifestyle that I want, which means I can then also provide for my family in a similar way, which, so it kind of works on many different levels. So that was the natural progression of it. So it comes out of, there was a demand for it. I was able to do it once I started, got results with people, and also from my, my worldview and how I view society and what we can do as individuals to change society for the better.
There's a lot there that came up for me while you were talking. The first was it's really easy to identify a problem, right? Like, well, I'm not gonna say it's really easy, but it's one thing to identify a problem, right? Like, okay, there's problems around. You kind of look around. There's a problem here. Okay, well, a man will then take responsibility, right? Like, I see a problem. So now what? Okay, well, let's do something about it. And that's what I really like about what you've done. It's like, okay, what came to my mind, and I think it's kind of been coming to my mind a little bit. I don't know if you know the story of Nehemiah. The walls in Jerusalem were broken down, and so it was a kind of a free for all. And he gets together. He's the king's cupbearer. The king gives him all the supplies that he needs, and he starts building a wall. But while he's building the wall, they're like they have tools in one hand and they have weapons in the other hand because they're being attacked as they're building. And so it's like these families are like side by side, and they're rebuilding the walls. And it might seem like that's kind of where we're at right now in history, was that the walls have fallen and there's nobody standing guard. And so it's kind of this free for all. There's chaos. And so men of faith need to start rebuilding the walls. And I think it's really, really what you're doing is foundational. It's a foundational thing, right? Because it's the family is in disarray. They've told us for years that marriage doesn't matter, that families don't matter, but it's all a lie. And then so there's a massive distrust between men and women. Like, you see it. I don't know if I see it so much in real life, because the places I go to, I wouldn't see it. Like, I don't go to like clubs. Like, I go to church, I go to like the grocery store, and like I go to like my kids' games and stuff. So like, those are more like family oriented places. But like, you see, kids have divorced parents and stuff like that. But I don't see like the massive dysfunction that it sounds like when you're kind of like scrolling through the timeline. But either way, like, you're doing your part. It's like, okay, I can't take all these people and solve it, but I can hopefully solve it for you, right? Like, there's my dad told me the story. It was like there was a bunch of sea stars on the shore, and they were gonna die because the sun was coming up or something like that. And there's just hundreds of thousands of sea stars on the shore. And this kid just comes, he starts grabbing them as fast as he can, just starts chucking them in the water. And this man comes up to him and he says, "What are you doing? Like, you can't save all of them." And the little boy just picks it up. It's like, "Well, I can save this one." And he just chucks it in the water, and just keeps on going. And I think I think that might be the attitude that we need to have, because there is just so much cynicism, right? It's easy to be cynical. It's like, oh, it's all going to, it's all going downhill, and it's going to keep on going downhill. And people kind of almost seem like they're cheering. It's like, no, like it's not. Like, I can do what I can by having a good marriage with my wife, which matters to me. And you're doing that with other people. It's like, hey, you can get to this point too, because studies even shown, right? Like, if you're in a neighborhood where there's a mom and a dad, it's a better neighborhood.
Yeah, man. All the studies show that people who are married, they live longer, they're happier, they're wealthier, they have better quality of life, they score better on mental health. All these kind of issues, which is kind of common sense, honestly. The fact that you need a study to tell you that is kind of shows you how far we've fallen, to be honest. Right. But which is again another issue, which maybe we could talk about, the need for sourcing and verifying everything rather than just what does your lived experience tell you? What does your intuition tell you? I mean, it's very clear that you see a kid who grows up in an environment where he has two parents, and you compare him to a kid who doesn't. I mean, it's not 100%, but I'd say probably 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10. The kid who's got the two parents is gonna do better in life. Right. And again, you can have the statistics to back that up. I'm not just pulling it out.
And then don't go to the exception, right? We're like, what about so and so? It's like, he's like 1 out of 100. So so stop with that. But so the coaching, then, that's interesting that it really kind of came about from the DMs that you. So if you don't know, like on Twitter, like there's a way to private message people. It's in the DMs. And so you're just getting all these messages from people like, hey, how do I find a girl? Or, I have a girl. I don't know if she's the right one. Is that kind of and you were getting lots of those, huh?
Yeah, quite a few. And then, about, questions about certain situations, like how should I respond in this situation? This has happened. Like my girlfriend's done this. Is this okay? Like I always remember one, my girlfriend's got a tattoo. Is that okay? I'm like, dude, she's got one tattoo. Chill out. Because I do tweets like, I do think a girl who's completely tattooed, that's something that I would say is, a red flag. It's, if she's young, I always question how she paid for those. They're expensive. So she's probably paying in some other form other than monetary. But this is one of the problems with Twitter, in that just the way the engagement works on the platform is you have to have, polarizing absolute takes, because otherwise you just get no engagement. But sometimes just have to clarify that nuance, right? If she's got like a little tattoo that she got when she was 19, I mean, come on, like we all make mistakes. I did a lot of dumb stuff when I was 19. So, but things like that, and I just kind of was like, I should probably start, I've got an audience. It's a this is something that is valuable. I should use this to my own benefit. And and I should, also, when you actually, one of the interesting things about when you actually start charging people for it is they actually take your advice way more seriously. Right. Which is, a psychological thing that if you pay for something, you value it more than if someone offers it you or gives it you for free. And it's just human psychology. There's no, I can't 100% say why that is, but, and they will consider it more valuable as well. They will just, if you pay for something, you just think, oh, this guy didn't give it me for free. I paid for it, therefore it must be right. Which gets them kind of invested in the outcome better, and at least gets them acting and working on that better than just getting a bit of a dopamine hit by asking a question and getting a response. Oh, solve the problem, and never doing anything about it.
Isn't that funny? Because I noticed that I don't really take a lot of time for myself, because I got a family and stuff. But I took some classes at church, and my church offers tons of classes that are for free, and I won't even show up. But for these ones, like, I paid for it, so it's like it's a fairly large time investment. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot of money for me, but it was like, oh, look, I paid this money, and all of a sudden, like, I have the time to do this thing because I paid money for it. And it was like, I had this note, because I think I had that notice maybe like two weeks ago. And it was really funny, because it's kind of that same thing. Like, I took it more serious because I paid for it. If this was a normal class, I'd be like, oh, I'll kind of show up, whenever it's convenient. But because I paid for it, like I was in school, it's like, oh, okay, like this is something I'm paying for, so I'm gonna go and take it more seriously.
Mhm.
So I think there's something to that, but also there, kind of filters out for you too, right? People who are actually serious. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
this is something that I'm not trying to get a dopamine hit or just trying to like just pick your brain or whatever. It's like I really want to know, and I'm willing to pay for it because this is there's some pain points here, and I want them solved.
Yeah, and especially as I can solve them as well. This is the thing. Like when I was starting off in my coaching before I fully developed my system, it wasn't as effective, right? And then actually it was through some of those mistakes that taught me how to be more effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's at the point where, if you're in a certain position, I can't guarantee it because half of it's on them, but
Mm-hmm.
like I can definitely like put them in a position to succeed if they're
Mm-hmm.
willing to work on it. As long as they're willing to put in the effort and put in the action, they basically get success.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I'd say from the people who put in the work, probably 90% succeed and get the
That's
goal they
great.
want, whether that's to get into a relationship or at least, I can't, one of the things I always say to my clients is I can get you in the point where you can take the opportunities that come to you, but I can't tell who you're going to meet in the time we're working together or
Yeah.
afterwards, right? That's not in my hands, right?
Right.
That's in God's hands. Like,
Right.
but
Right.
I can guarantee that after we've worked together or during the time we're working together, should you meet that person, you'll know how to behave and you'll be able to take that opportunity. So, and that's hugely valuable. I mean, I've had plenty of clients now because I've been doing it for a while who've, you know, working together, they got good success, but they didn't meet the person. You
Mm-hmm.
don't hear from them, and then they'll get back to you after 3-4 months, like, "Yo, I'm in a relationship now. It's going great. Really appreciate your help.
Oh,
I think
nice.
don't think I could have done it without you." So, yeah, it's really satisfying personally. And as I say, every person I help like that is a potential family I start with the right
Mm-hmm.
values with, and the people I work with tend to be good people. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I see that as hugely valuable. A good guy who's got a good foundation, but just missing some areas or had some problems in the past and hasn't been able to get over them or whatever it might be. Now he's in a position where he can really have a family and he can be, live up to his own potential
Yeah.
and have that responsibility, because that responsibility also brings out the best in men, as I'm sure you're aware yourself.
Yeah. Are these young guys or guys kind of all age
Yeah,
ranges?
mixed ages. So I have guys who are young. I have guys who are mid 20s. I have guys 30s, and I have a couple of. I think my oldest client is like 50 something, 52 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a client at the moment who's 46-year-old who got divorced, who's currently really progressing into a relationship basically,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't have he was nowhere before we were working together. So it's super satisfying. We can transform these guys' lives around. It's personally really satisfying as well.
Yeah.
It's awesome when they get it.
Right. Yeah. There's something to that, right? Because your heart's in it for a reason, right? It's like you were kind of doing it for free already, and then now to
Mm-hmm.
be able to coach and make some income off of it, like it makes it like doubly rewarding. It's like everybody's winning, like so like they
And I
get what
get
they
to see the results. That's
yeah.
the best part. Like when you've
Yeah.
got a Twitter account, sorry for interrupting.
No, go
When
ahead.
you've got a Twitter account, like you don't even know if you're really helping anyone. You know what I mean? It's like I've got 20, I can't remember, 22,000 followers or something. Obviously these people are reading what I'm writing, but I have no idea whether I've actually made an impact on these lives unless they DM me personally and tell me, which does happen occasionally. Whereas when you're working with someone one-on-one and you can see that transformation, it's like, you really feel like you're doing something. You really
Mm-hmm.
feel like, okay, I'm actually making an actual impact. Yeah, it's only like one person, not
Mm-hmm.
22,000, but that's a real impact that I
Yeah.
can 100% say has happened. So that's super cool.
And maybe a little more satisfying than your day job.
Oh yeah, way more.
Just a little bit, huh? Yeah,
Just a touch.
it's interesting how you kind of go into this thing and it's like, okay, this is my day job, but it's not really fulfilling. But this thing on the side that I'm doing is just really like gets you excited because like yeah, like who doesn't want more families and good families? Are you seeing like a trend for the people who are coming to you, like, hey, like this is like the big pain point for a lot of them, or it's kind of yeah, it's just kind of like a range of issues that you kind of haven't been able to pinpoint?
It varies, you know. In general, most people have some kind of issue that stops them from connecting with women, or they have a fear response or a defense mechanism that manifests in many different ways. But it's normally they'll have either been hurt in some way in a previous relationship, or maybe growing up as kids, or, you know, something happened at school or whatever it might be that's caused like a kind of fear of intimacy or a fear of opening up. Because whenever you're intimate with someone, whenever you get emotionally vulnerable with someone, it's called vulnerability for a reason. It leaves you open to pain. Right. And when you've done that in the past, and then, you know, maybe you misjudged who to do it with, or, you know, just through the course of life that you got really hurt, your ego will create defense mechanisms to stop you feeling that pain again. Now, the problem is you kind of subconsciously, this happens subconsciously, you're not aware of that's what you're doing. And then it creates these negative habits that then mean that you can't open up to people. And therefore you always get, either you can't ever get to a point to get kind of intimate with a woman, or you get to a point where you just close down and it never gets any further. And it depends. The way that actually happens is very varied, but that's the major issue that most people have, not everyone. And like I say, I have different people at different points in lives. Yeah. And one issue that I do deal with quite a lot is people who have also had that kind of pain and then come to the red pill. And as you're aware, like I know you're aware, the red pill's great, which is why I'm somewhat parallel to it, or operate in a parallel space. But a lot of it is very bitter and can be actively harmful and painful for people and destructive, and it stops you from creating the kind of relationship creating the foundation where you can have a relationship. And these guys have fallen into that, and in some ways it's been good for them, right? Because it does build you up as individuals. A lot of them, that's why it's kind of like a stepping stone. I consider the red pill a stepping stone, where, you know, if you have been hurt and you were a bit of a nice guy and you're a bit too soft, and then you go, you know, you kind of go too far to the other extreme, but you do improve in your career. You do start working out. You do get better in these areas. But then you hit the next snagging point, which is, you know, I want to have a relationship with a woman. I want to have a family, but I can't do it because I have all these bad ideas which are preventing me from succeeding, basically, because it pushes people away, or you create this bitter lens. You get paranoid. You start seeing problems that aren't there, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a common problem that I see. And I have known people who have literally ruined good relationships as a result of that pattern as well. So that's quite a common thing that I deal with, but it's not, which is why I say I'm, you know, the missing piece between the red pill and a real relationship, because I'm that stepping stone that takes you from the self-improvement and becoming a more masculine man to becoming from kind of a negative perspective of masculinity, to take that bridging gaps, because most of it's positive, but there's that bitter twist that makes it negative. And then just taking that step that means you can then ascend into a more patriarchal or paternal figure.
Right. There's levels
and have
to
a real
it.
relationship.
Yeah, there's levels to it, and it's like, you know, you don't use it as your like North Star, because that's when you end up in trouble. I think it was interesting what you said about intimacy. When you're talking about intimacy with your clients, are we talking about sex or actual just vulnerability and being able to open up with someone and share your fears, your dreams, things like that?
So both. The way I actually see like that kind of intimacy is like, I see all elements of a relationship are a building of intimacy, whether it's sexual, whether it's sharing of dreams, whether it is just connecting. When you connect with someone, like the example I like to often use is like, I'm sure like listeners will have had this situation where you've been talking with someone, you've just met them, right? You have a really good conversation, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm enjoying this too much, right? Because if I feel like I'm enjoying it too much, like what if they're not enjoying it, right? That's a form of intimacy, and that's you blocking that connection with that person, because, you know, they're probably, if you're enjoying the conversation that much, there's a strong chance they are as well, because it takes two to tango,
right?
And this happens between, you know, guys. Like, this isn't just women, but that's an element of intimacy. That's a beyond just like a surface level small talk conversation, right? But there will be that feeling that's like, oh, I don't want to show my true feelings about this situation, because maybe they don't feel the same and they'll therefore reject me on an emotional level, right? So that's just one example of it. And I think within a relationship, every stage, there's another level of intimacy from, from approaching a woman for the first time. Every time you meet, every relationship starts with either an introduction or an approach. Every relationship starts with you not knowing the other person, right? At some point, right? Maybe you've known them for a while, right? But even before that, you'll have been either introduced to them or you'll have somehow, approached them, whether it's at a party, at church, or, in the street, whatever it might be. And just to do that and to connect on that level requires a degree of intimacy to then go to whatever the next stage might be. Like maybe, to go on a date with that person. That's again, you don't go on a date with everyone. So there's a level of intimacy there already in that scenario. So it's just breaking those boundaries at every stage. And different people have problems at different stages. Yeah. Right. Some people can get going.
No, I was gonna say that sounds like a confidence issue too, right? It's like, well, I've heard this phrase like intimacy, because you think intimacy, a lot of people think sex, and it's like, oh, you can be complete strangers and then be intimate, but it's like, no, you've still hidden yourself because you're not showing who you are. And I've heard intimacy is really into me. I see, like, me and you are talking, and our guards are down. We're talking about things that we don't normally talk. I mean, we're two guys talking about sex and relationships. I mean, this is a vulnerable conversation, but a lot of it is, do I have am I comfortable or confident to show that I'm enjoying myself? Like, because I don't want, if I have to hide that, then it's like, oh, there's some insecurity there, but also that I have something that's worth sharing that you want to hear also. So there's a lot of that at play, but I actually like that you didn't put it in the sexual consciously, just two men even talking that, hey, you want to seem like you enjoy sex, because there is this thing where it's like, oh, don't show too much enthusiasm, play it cool, like tamper it down. It's always like tamper it down. It's like, no, man, like I enjoy my conversations with whoever I'm speaking to. If I'm really enjoying it, then just show that you're really enjoying it. There has to be some kind of there has to be a kind of like a self-worth that, like, it's okay for me to enjoy this conversation. It's like I'm valuable enough that that somebody can enjoy a conversation with me.
Yeah, and that's what in the dating world they often refer to as frame, by the way. Like, that's your frame. It's your self-belief, your self-confidence that, you're not, you believe whatever you believe, or you're acting whatever you act in that situation. You're feeling whatever you feel in that situation. You're not worried about how the other person is going to respond to that feeling, because that's how you feel, and you're just going to share it with them. And if they don't like it, like, okay, whatever. Like, that's what a real strong masculine frame should be. Like, it's the ability to be able to go to just be you, just be you, in whatever circumstance that might be. If you're having fun, show you're having fun. If you're not enjoying it, okay, let's be socially adept, right, and not tell the other person they're an idiot. But but like that, you're not then having to fake it. It's like, okay, this is a situation I'm not comfortable with, or I'm not into. I might have to just maintain it for the sake of appearances or whatever, but I'm not going to therefore like pretend to this guy that I'm their best friend because of that situation if I didn't enjoy it, because I have the confidence and the belief and the frame that is like, I trust my judgment, right, whatever that might be. So I'm not going to let that affect my behavior. I'm not going to let the response of other people affect my behavior. If you're in a relationship with a woman, like, the most obvious example of this is if she gives you a test or she challenges you on something and you believe it, and then you should, if you really believe that, you should be like, look, I know where you're coming from, but I'm not sure that's the right way of looking at things. You want to communicate it in a way that's not like, not too confrontational, not an idiot kind of thing again. So, but like, you should be unshakable in your belief. Yeah. Now, the other side of that is if she has a good, relevant point, you should also be confident enough in your frame that she might be right, and that you can reassess and you can judge the situation based on what she's saying and think, okay, actually, I think you're right, actually, and I'm going to go along with what you say. But there's a difference between assessing it and coming to your own conclusion and just doing what she says because you don't want to have a fight. You don't want to have an argument. You think it's going to appease her. And that's the same thing in that kind of self-worth and that self-belief. Your frame in that situation. It's the same kind of concept.
Yeah. How much of what your coaching kind of came from you to the realizations that you had? Because I've talked to Leela Thomasone. She helps people, women get married. And I talked, and to me it was just like, well, isn't a lot of this stuff just kind of like common sense? But it's like I have to step back and like, man, I came from, like, my parents loved each other, and I saw that, and I came from a loving family, and I had extended family that was also very loving. So like for me, like a lot of the stuff that I hear, it's like, oh, I did that when I was 16 and I didn't even know this stuff. I was just doing it. But like I had all that framework, and plus, like, I think like I had done things that made me like personally confident in myself, so that was also helpful as well. That that's kind of a different layer too. But for you to kind of go through and like diagnose, like, okay, how was it for you, and like seeing your family, because all that stuff matters, right? Like seeing the role models around you, and then your experiences also.
Yeah, that's huge. Like a lot of the way that we model relationships is based on our parents and how we viewed our parents' relationships. So yeah, if you come from a healthy home where there was a healthy marriage, where people really did love each other and demonstrated that and had the right model for a relationship, you'll naturally model that. But the problem is, in today's society, and this is one of the things I talk about in Weaponized Sex, is a lot of people don't have that. There's a lot of dysfunctional marriages as we've lost the principles behind what makes a successful marriage, or we've forgotten those principles, or they've been eroded by cultural institutions. And the single mothers have always existed, but they were traditionally supported by the community because they were rare. And it depends actually if they're widowed, or if they would have been ostracized if they'd have like maybe cheated on a man and got divorced or something. But if they were widowed, or the community would support them, and it was something that was nowhere near as high of a proportion today as a result of the sexual revolution, basically, and a few other cultural things. Again, I talk about in Weaponized Sex.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who haven't had these healthy models of a relationship, and they don't know how to model it. And there's other people who did have that, but then that maybe they've had an error in judgment, or they maybe didn't quite have they weren't operating from the right frame, and they maybe picked the wrong woman, and then they've suffered because of that, or they just weren't able to act in the right way, or they believed what culture told you about a marriage, and that you should just acquiesce to the woman, and she should be, just give her what she wants, be the nice guy, and that
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, and of course these relationships break down, and then you have to second guess yourself, and then there's all these other issues that come up with that. So and there's not a lot of literature or help, or these things are not well articulated in culture in general. So when you actually find someone who's speaking about these things in a way that resonates with you, it's like, oh wow, I don't hear this normally.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why our space is quite a powerful one. Even I know we're a tiny corner of the internet, but it does have quite a lot of power because it resonates with people when they hear these kind of messages.
You know what? I just had the thought maybe a couple of days ago, Jack. Like, I'm not a handy guy. Like when it's like stuff breaks around the house, like I gotta call a handyman. And I think back like guys who are maybe like 10 years older than me, like they can all like fix those things because they were like laying tile and fixing stuff. And I was like, what's the difference here? It's like, well, like I think my generation might have been when it started, because there's still got guys my age who are very handy, but like the younger and younger they get, you can see that they're less and less handier around the house and like construction and things like that. But you think like they had those models, right? of like, hey, like, yeah, we're fixing stuff, we're getting stuff done. And I was like, well, I think the same thing is happening for people and families, right? There's less and less models for them. So it's like, because like I'll see like a 20-year-old and be like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, you're like, but that would be the same as like, like a 50-year-old like seeing me try to lay down some tile, because it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like, for me to, I came from the place of like, oh, I need to give these kids great, these people, or just these people grace, because I had the
Yeah.
models, right? And so understanding that that was nothing that I deserved. I didn't do anything. I was just born into the right family.
Yeah.
And like somebody else who was like very handy and stuff like that, they had the models and stuff, but that was something that like all boys kind of got for generations. And then that kind of broke down, and then now the families have like broken down, so there's less and less models. Like, there is no, I can't think off the top of my head of like, if there are family models that kind of pop up, they're kind of like, what, I don't know if this is a word, but tabloidized and sensationalized and just kind of like
Mm.
smeared, if I can even think of one. But like, I think there's been TV families or whatever, but there's no good models. And so
Mm.
when I say things like online, like, hey, don't have sex before marriage, it's like, what are you talking about? It's like, dude, like, these are things that really helped me in my marriage. I've been married a long time. Like, I've been with my wife a long time. Like, this stuff works. Like, I don't know why it does.
Yeah, man. There's a whole chapter in my book about that, like, the whole virgin marriage thing and why it's important. And there's all kinds of reasons that yeah, we don't think about, we don't
Mm-hmm.
consider. Biological reasons, I think. God made us in a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
he told us to do this, and there's a reason for that, and there's a reason why these belief systems have carried out through the ages. There's a reason why once they've been removed, society is degenerated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no coincidence. Yeah, it's funny enough, one of the biggest things I get hate for, like, or any tweet that, one of the topics I talk about the most, that I get the most hate for, is just being pro-marriage. Like, weirdly enough, it's
Really?
like, yeah, none of my other takes, like, that's the one that every time I post anything that's pro-marriage, I get like at least 3 or 4 people just like, you don't know what you're talking about, like, marriage is terrible, like, and it's
Oh
just
yeah.
like, guys, you don't realize, like, you're part of the problem. Like, that's the issue. Like, you also have internalized this negative frame to marriage, which is every bit the mirror of women. Actually, you having that frame is more likely to make you get screwed.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because this, another thing I talk about often is like, or one of the things, the red pill, when they get paranoid about certain things. You're saying you're always looking for a woman who's going to be cheating. You
Mm-hmm.
know what? If you look for something, you're going to find it. If you're looking
Yeah.
for a little bit of manipulation, you're going to find it. Like,
Uh-huh.
people are naturally manipulative. We all do it. Persuasion is, I would say the difference between manipulation and guidance is intention, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if your intention is pure, it's, you're guiding that person. If your
Yeah.
intention is nefarious, then you're manipulating them. But
Yeah.
either way, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
Like, so if you start looking for these things, you're going to find them. And when you start finding them and you see them as negative, it's going to break down your trust and your intimacy, because instead of accepting that, we are all flawed beings and we all have our imperfections, and instead of accepting that and trying to overcome that,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking for this, this perfect
Yeah.
relationship model, or like this perfect situation that means, if women were like this, we wouldn't have divorce problems. It's like, I mean, yeah, but hope is a great thing. You can hope for
Yeah.
women to be like that,
Yeah.
but I don't think you're going to find it.
Yeah. You know what came to my mind when you said that you kind of like attract to it, like, in the Bible, there's the story of Job, and he was a righteous man, and then um the devil tests him, and God says you can't touch him, but his he loses all his money, he loses his family, like, all in like a the worst day you can imagine. But the things that he says, He says, the thing that I have most feared has come upon me. So this had been a thought that he had. I don't know, like, if if that was part of it or whatever, but like it just kind of one of those things where it's like he had it in his mind. If women are terrible, to be trusted, and you have that around you, I think the same thing. Like I thought that
Mm.
women were wonderful. I I just wanted to find the one that was worth marrying. But I thought,
Yeah.
you could say, maybe I am a romantic because I love my mom. My mom was a wonderful, beautiful woman. I had aunts that were wonderful to me. I had, when I'd go to my friends' houses and it was like, hey Joel, how you doing? Like, can we make you something to eat? It's like, man, like they were always really good to me. And so I didn't have this view. But it goes back to, like, you listen to the music and it's just like, well, women are to be used and sexualized, and that's all
Hmm.
that they're good for. Or you got to be careful because they're gonna try and pull one over on you. And that's usually coming from people who didn't have the best models to begin with already. In movies, like, right, like there's nothing interesting about seeing a happily married couple where nothing goes wrong. Like there's no story there. So the movies is like, oh, like
Yeah.
someone's having a secret affair. And so, like, that's what our minds are trained for. It's like, oh, whatever little sign that comes up, like you start looking for that stuff because, oh, I saw that in a movie one time. Somebody's been watching too much, what is Lifetime specials where, whatever. But I think that's it's a big thing, right? Like that that yes, that women are wonderful. You just have to find the right one, but that they're out there, and they're great, and they make your life like so much better. Like I can imagine
Mm.
my life without my wife. And on our worst days too, like, we have lots of kids and it gets busy, and like kids get sick, and there'll be some times when we just look at each other. It's like, nobody else I'd rather do this with. It's like, yeah, nobody.
Mm.
Like it's not it's a hard day today. There's nobody else I'd rather do this with, because you're gonna have the hard days, right? It's like
Oh yeah.
you want a woman who I wanted a woman who was beautiful but who had high character. Like that was really it. That's my wife.
Yeah, that's what you got to look for. And I mean, the thing is with all these red pill things, there's an element of truth to them. There are bad women
Mm-hmm.
out there, just like there's
Mm-hmm.
bad men.
Right.
You do have to be careful of those. But like, you have to love women to succeed with them. Like, if you don't like women, you don't love women, you're not gonna succeed with
Mm-hmm.
in general with them. It has to be that. And like you say, like those tough times when they come, like it requires a good foundation, because if you don't have that kind of outlook, and if she doesn't have that kind of
Right.
outlook, when
Right.
tough times come, people will run away from it. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have the right outcome, you come through them together. As you say, like, there's nobody else I'd rather do this with. Like, that's obviously the right attitude. And trials make relationships. Trials build
Mm-hmm. They
intimacy as
do.
well. This is
Mm-hmm.
another thing. Like, that's what really makes or breaks a relationship, because the trials you go through together are what you have for each other that no one else can give.
Right.
Right? Those experiences, those times together, no one else can give that.
Right.
So when you have those bonding moments, they are what really strengthen a couple's intimacy and make them into a really, to become one. That's
Yeah.
what actually makes that happen. I have an idea of, like, the whole concept of two becoming one is because marriage should be like an ego death, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
are two people, two individuals beforehand, your own ego should be looking out for itself as number one. Like that should be your base state when you are single. I do believe that. I think you should be looking after yourself first. But once you become married, the health of your marriage supersedes yourself. And that doesn't mean your wife is number one. The marriage becomes number one. And to actually shed that old perspective where you are the most important thing requires a great deal of pain. It requires a bit of suffering. It requires an ego death where you do cast off the old you and create this new you, which has a different model for viewing the world. And the hard thing about a marriage is it requires both of you to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then once both of you do that, and you do both put the marriage and later family, but I also believe the marriage should come above family, because the marriage is the heart of the family. When you have that moment where you come through it and you both put that together, that's when two become one, which obviously the Bible talks about. It requires that shedding of your old self and becoming this new, like almost a collective ego, where you two are, and your marriage is who you are and is the ascendant part of your life. And that's hard.
No, it really is. But also those things are like, so like I was dating my wife, loved her. I loved her already. And it was like, this is the woman I'm going to marry. And we had a family member who was in the hospital for, for a few, if it was, I might've been like a month or something like that. And my wife and I were long distance, and she was working, going to school, and she had, she was she had lots of stuff going on. And before, we would see each other maybe like once every like 2 months or something like that. But when this family member was in the hospital, she drove down every weekend. She would come, she would clean the house, she would make us dinner. And it was really hard. But once we were done, I was like, I'm going to marry her, and I'm never going to leave her because of what she did. Like, I'm never going to leave her. And there, I've been married. This is year 16 for me. And there's been ups and downs, but it's like, no, I remember what she did. We're not, no, I'm going to let my ego go, or I'm going to, we're going to work through this, because I remember, and this was a long time ago. I mean, this is almost 20 years ago now. And it's like, no, I remember what she did. And so no, we're going to keep going. Cause you think that, marriage is just like, brunches and, hot sex, or I don't know what people think, but it's like, no, it's people getting sick, funerals, weddings, things that kind of arguments, lots of arguments. Yeah. You had a tweet about arguing. It's like, I'm crazy about my wife, but I'm crazy about my wife. So that means that like stupid stuff will could set me, because it's like it's a double-edged sword. And I think it's the same thing for her, for me. So like we can just like have argument. We can go, for, everything's good, and then have this big argument. Because we're crazy about each other. But also it's like, I'm not afraid to say what I want, and she's not afraid to say what she wants. And so there's going to be that natural, hey, we need to get this sorted out. Like, hey, I'm not doing my part, or you're not doing your part. Like, let's talk through this. And that's a whole nother level of the marriage.
Yeah, and you need those releases of tension anyway. I'm pretty sure there's a study that says that couples who argue, like not too much, but argue infrequently, they will gauge their relationship better than couples that never argue, because there is an element that, you're never going to have a perfect relationship. And if you're not, then and arguing is not necessarily the best form of communication, but sometimes you need that release of tension, that emotional spike that is like, it kind of bursts through. And after you've come through that, there's like a new clarity to your relationship where it feels great again, after that heated moment. So yeah, that's important. How you manage it's important as well.
Yeah.
Like always staying in control during that argument, not letting your anger get the best of you, and doing something that you really regret.
Right.
That's the problem. And some guys have issues with that, elements of self-control and self-discipline in that area. But in general, if you can remain in control, but you can have an argument where you're both sticking to your guns, but eventually you come through that, because again, you put the marriage above it, and maybe you realize like, oh, actually, I see this from your perspective. Even though I thought I was right in that moment, like I empathize with where you are actually, and how that made you feel, or whatever it might be. And I realized that actually, even though I thought I was right, I want to apologize for it, because the way it made you feel, right? And I love you, and I don't want to hurt you, actually, right? And having that kind of resolution, and then also the same, it takes two people. It takes them also being able to, okay, but it's once you've humbled yourself like that, normally you get that resolution. You have to, one person will have to humble themselves first, and then the other person will be willing to step down as well.
It's the taking the responsibility, because you can be right,
Yeah.
but you can also say it
Be
the
wrong.
wrong way. Right.
But you can also be right and wrong at the same
right,
time.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that was something that I had, because I've kind of changed, quite a bit over the years. Before, I would just say things like as nasty as I wanted to because I was right. And it was just like, whoa, like, you love her, right? That's how you want to talk to somebody that you love? Like, oh yeah, okay. That's not the way I would. I guess because for me it was like, well, you can talk to me that way. Like, you can talk like just say what you need to say, talk, but it's like, well, no, she's not you, like,
Yeah.
or she's not you. So, like, realize that first, because that was something like we would talk about all the time. Like, I'm not you. Like, I wanted her to be like me. Like, well, I can take it, so you take it. Like, this is the truth. Just deal with it. Like, and then it's like, well, it doesn't work that way. She's not you, and I married her because she was not me. And being able to kind of like, oh yeah, I didn't. But one of the things that we kind of came through, we kind of had this idea like of like seeing each other back to back. And it was like, I can see this on here on this side, and you have your blind spots, but I'm in your blind spot, and I can see what's behind you, and I could kind of tell you what's behind here. And that takes a big level of trust, right? Like, we didn't get there overnight, but
You never will. Yeah, it always takes time.
yeah, for sure. And I've been with I think over 20 years. But these are things that I'm learning now, that it's like, okay, like, I'm gonna teach my kids, because like I want them to have great marriages. I want them to have good families. I want my grandkids to be raised well, and their kids. And I think that's one of the things where it's like, oh, okay, that's like like you talk about, like, impacting the world. It's like, well, I'm just a regular dude, but I can love my wife, and I can raise my kids to the best of my ability, and ask God for wisdom in raising them, and pray for them, and then hope that it turns out well, but take responsibility for what's mine, and my family is mine. And I think it's wonderful what you're doing with these other young men, because to me, it was a miracle the way I met my wife. Like, I don't know, I couldn't recreate that. Like, that was God.
Yeah.
And then so for you to be able, like, hey man, do this thing and get together, it's like, hey, God bless you, brother.
Yeah, I'd say the same for my wife as well. The way we met was like, I can, like, because my wife eventually led me to God as well, and I can I can see that that path that's kind of, with hindsight, right? I couldn't feel it at that time, but even the way it happened, there was we faced a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties. We're different. We're from different countries, with different cultures. We don't have the same visa. I couldn't work where she was from. We overcame all these trials, all these challenges, and that's what made our relationship so strong. Is because we were both willing to overcome them and work through them. So this is one thing I try and drill down into people. As soon as tough things come, you go your own separate ways. You're not in a relationship. When those difficult times come, you have to overcome them together. That's how you build that intimacy, build that trust, and build that relationship. So, but like you say, there's very few representations of this. There's very few people talking about that. Even in our space, very few people talk about that kind of idea. Some people do, but in general, I know Twitter is, there's only so much you can say in 280 characters,
right.
But that's an issue that's very rarely talked about, is the importance of trials and going through trials together.
Well, and not ones that you created, but just ones that are kind of there, right? Like, because I was a long distance relationship, right? But it's like, seems like people will ask the question like, oh, is it worth it? It's like, well, if they live next door to you, it's worth it. But then if they moved 100 miles, is it not worth it anymore? Or it's still worth it? Okay, if they're like 300 miles, is it not worth it anymore? Like like for me, if my wife lived all the way across the world, worth it. Like, doesn't matter. Like it's her. Doesn't matter where in the world. Like distance didn't matter. And I think maybe that's a filter you got to figure out. It's like, well, what are you in it for? Are you just in it for, the physical needs that you have, or just a good time? Or are you trying to, because I wanted to be married. So it was like I was looking for a wife. And I think that's like the big thing that a lot of guys are like, I'm just looking for a good time. I was like, hey man, looking for a good time, you can end up in a world of hurt.
Pretty low bar.
It's a low bar, but it's like that's just like you end up making bad decisions, and now you have lifetime consequences because you wanted to have a good time. It's like, this is not to me. It wasn't something to be playful with. Like, I didn't even go on dates with people who I didn't think were like, it's like, I know this is not going to go anywhere. So it was a very high bar. But I mean, that was me, and I was very different from my friends. Like, I was very, very different from my friends. They wanted to have a good time. Like, all right, man, I'm trying to build something. Like, okay.
Yeah, the irony is they'll turn that around when they see it later, and you've missed out on all these fun times. But then what they don't see is the inverse, right? What happens when you're your age and they're your age, and the difference then. The older I get, the more I see the differences between the guys who settled down and the guys who didn't. Like in my friendship group, right? And the guys who met someone who really took it seriously as well, not just meet someone like kind of the way that the place they're in now is so different to the guys who never did settle down and just carried on partying, never took things seriously. Like, we're at that age now where you're really starting to see the difference between a good woman and, no woman, or even just an okay woman, or settling for someone who's, like you say, maybe provides some kind of, value in terms of maybe sexual value, or maybe like just convenience, having someone there so you're not alone. But the difference between guys who've got a really great relationship or found someone, set that bar high and put weight on it and went through it together is now starting to become very noticeable. And I think as we get older, those kind of trends are only going to widen, and unfortunately, unless they turn it around, which everyone is capable of, by the way. We're all capable of redeeming ourselves. It's never too late. Like I say, I've got a client who's 46 who's now starting a relationship with a really good woman. It seems like it's going great. Like, it's not too late for him. It's not too late for you either. But it does take a willingness to want to change.
Yeah, so. I think of they talk about the privilege talk, right? And before, it would have been a privilege to go to college, but now I think the privilege is, to find a good woman and get married and have kids and raise them within the structure of family is going to be a huge separator in privilege. And I want my kids
100%.
I want my kids to have all the privilege. I want to make enough money. I want the money privilege. I want the the education privilege, but the family privilege. My kids, I want them to be deeply rooted in their faith, because you just see the stuff that they're going to do. It's like I need them to know who they are, who God made them to be, who their daddy is, who their mommy is, and that's just kind of the way that I see it. Before we get wrapped up here, brother. Any last kind of thoughts here before we get wrapped up? I know this was like a quicker one.
It's all good, man. No, it's really good to speak with you again, to talk about these topics. It's really important that we have, one of the things I talk about again in Weaponized Sex is it's really important we have people who provide this model for people, of good relationships and having this kind of relationship, and almost propagandize it, at least put it out there and show people, there is this alternative way of living that, now is alternative, where it used to be the model for all of history. But anyway, that's the world we live in, right? But, and it's really important to have people like yourself, like myself as well. Hopefully I'm presenting that kind of message that is aspirational in a way that is, it's aspirational in a healthy way. Anyone can have a good relationship with the right foundations. Anyone can. There's a few exceptions. I do think there are some biological exceptions. There are some men who are just born playboys, but those people are very much the exception, not the rule. And if you're listening to this podcast, it ain't you. But there are people like that. But But for everyone, we need people like that put forward this positive message like yourself. So it's really great. There's been more of a resurgence of it in our scene, which I think is very positive. I think the more negative masculinity, the more negative people towards masculinity in our space have almost been pushed out of it now, actually, which I think is quite good. They've probably gone elsewhere, but I very rarely get people atting Rollo Tomasi in my mentions anymore, which is something.
Well, I think the pendulum has to swing, right? It's like, this is toxic. This isn't like we've gone down this road, and we can kind of see where it's led, and I want to turn back. So hopefully that, I like to mess around a lot, but that really where my heart is like, hey, family, I'm pro family, like, get married, have kids, love God, and then figure everything else out. Get those things solid. Those are your building blocks. You want to get a Lambo, get your Lambo, man, but don't do it at the cost of your family. I'm all for people making money. I hope you make thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, Jack. I really do. Like, you're doing wonderful work, brother. So is there any way? Are you taking like multiple clients at a time, or are you kind of full right now?
Yeah, I'm pretty close to being full, but like, the way that I run my system is I don't keep clients around forever. We solve your problems quick. I'm not a therapist who you talk to every week for the whole year. You have a problem, we'll fix it, right? Like, and I won't take you on if I don't think we can fix it as well. So I have fast client turnaround because I get results, and then hopefully that, some people need to stay a little bit longer. Some people don't. Some people have, like to have kind of the counseling element, and they'll carry on, like they'll bump in periodically. But in general, my client turnaround is pretty fast once they got results. So I usually have spaces for people. I think I currently only have one or two, but I'll have a couple of people finishing off in a couple of weeks within this month. So the best way, if you do want to work with me, is you have to apply. I don't accept everyone because I only have limited time, and I only accept people who I can help. There's an application form that I ask people to go through. But the best way to do that is either to join my newsletter or just follow me on Twitter, and there's a link to it on my Twitter bio. But get on my newsletter, because that's where you'll work out whether I'm going to be the person who's right for you as well. Because I talk a lot about these kind of issues, and if you enjoyed this podcast, we're probably congruently aligned in our values. But that's the best place for it.
Yeah, check out this one and the last one that we did a year ago when we talked about weaponized sex. But man, always a pleasure speaking to you, brother. Like, you're one of my favorite people on Twitter. You're one of the first people that I found, like, dang, this guy, like, I didn't know that people thought like this. But yeah, you're one of my favorites.
Appreciate
man. This is, go ahead.
Appreciate it.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the love. Always appreciate the love.
This is the Read Your Keys podcast. If you're enjoying it, go ahead and follow, subscribe, do that whole thing. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.